The galleries, I don't know. I'd like to know the stories of the galleries and the tickets because the galleries seem almost solidly Goldwater. But that is not normally so when tickets are distributed in the normal way.
The distribution of the tickets, however, Eric, was handled through state delegations.
Yes,
At least this was how it was supposed to be handled. Each state was delegated a proportion of the gallery tickets, and if you carry through the same convention situation, that means 2/3 of the gallery would be
I think that's
support.
probably about the way it would work out anyway, yes. The stories are still coming in on the news wires of the counterfeiting of tickets.
Bill Stossman reporting it from outside.
But I don't think the implication is that either political side here is engaged in this. It may be just scalpers trying to make a fast buck.
Yes, there was somebody out there trying to sell them, I gather.
I think so.
Speaking now, and one of the seconding speeches for Governor Rockefeller is Glenda Washington of Illinois, a twice defeated Republican candidate for Congress.
Indeed, to be heard in a Republican Party, the party of Lincoln. This party was born of the conviction that the federal government had a definite and a decisive role to play in securing the protection of the rights of the individual American. It was to foster federal action to prevent the spread of slavery into new areas that the Republican Party first came into existence. The Emancipation Proclamation, signed by the first Republican president, Abraham Lincoln, has taken its place in history, along with the Magna Carta, the Declaration of Independence, and the U.S. Constitution, as one of the great documents of human liberty. It was the Republican Party that sponsored and enacted the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendments to the Constitution, which clearly expressed the responsibility of the federal government in guaranteeing the freedom and dignity of all Americans. For nearly 100 years, a broad segment of this opposition party, it was the Republican Party that sponsored and enacted the laws making the slaves the freemen. And for nearly 100 years, a broad segment of the opposition party have not only failed to take action to secure these rights, but have been actively in opposition to them. And it was not until the presidency of Dwight D. Eisenhower in 1957 that the first civil rights legislation was passed. Since that period, immediately after the Civil War. Today, we have a new Civil Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and that was made possible by 80% of the Republican votes in Congress. Now, at long last, after 100 years, the federal government is approaching the position to see to it that there are no first-class rights and no second-class rights, but only the rights of American citizens, regardless of their color and regardless of whether they live in Mississippi or whether they live in Massachusetts. It's up to the Republican Party, the party of Lincoln, to name for the presidency a man who believes in the historic role of the federal government and the Republican Party in assuring equal justice to all. It is up to the Republican Party to name a man who has supported this role in the federal government and in the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It is up to the Republican Party to name a man who has demonstrated by performance in public office his dedication to this most basic of all American precepts. There is such a man. This is a man whose family for 5 generations have been identified with the civil rights and equal opportunity. This is a man under whose leadership the great state of New York has eliminated all legal barriers to equal opportunity for all. This is a man of judgment, of patience, of firmness, of proven leadership in the area of human rights as in all other areas encompassed by the government. I am proud to second the nomination of a real Republican, a responsible Republican, and a true champion of human rights, Nelson Aldrich Rockefeller. Thank you.
Mr. Genoa Washington, 69-year-old delegate from Illinois, was an alternate delegate to the 12th General Assembly of the United Nations appointed by President Eisenhower. He's a former president of the Chicago branch of the NAACP, former vice president of the Cook County Bar Association, incidentally.
For General Eisenhower 8 years ago.
I was introducing the man who made the principal nominating speech for then General Eisenhower in 1952, Theodore McKeldin, one-time governor of Maryland, now the mayor of Baltimore. Mike Wallace, we hear, is down on the floor. Somebody there. Mike, come in.
Walter, I'm with Congress.
I don't think it would be offered, but you know, I mean,
I'm talking with Congressman John Lindsay of New York, who is talking about speculation. Speculation as to the vice presidency. There is a rumor, as you know, that the Goldwater camp is thinking, at least, of making an approach to the Scranton camp to try to put the two of them together on a ticket. Congressman Lindsay, do you know anything of such an approach?
no, I have no knowledge of that at all. If any such thing is being done, why, it's being done at the highest level, at the campaign manager level. I would doubt if it was occurring.
There was also talk this morning, Congressman Lindsay, that there was going to be a summit meeting in the New York camp to try to determine just how they were going to handle this coming campaign, inasmuch as they had been so strongly anti-Goldwater, and of course it looks like Goldwater is going to be the nominee.
Again, I don't think that's correct. That rumor is not founded. There's no such meeting that I know of. The New York top echelon has their regular breakfast meeting every morning at 7:30. I go every morning at 7:30. There's no such discussions at all this morning.
Well, isn't it an agonizing problem for the Republican leadership in New York?
Well, there's no doubt about the fact that the Republican leadership in New York State will have a good deal of discussion, a good deal of thinking to do. It's going to be a very complicated campaign.
What are your alternatives?
I don't understand. You mean the...
Well, there are the alternatives, I suppose. First of all, that you could support Barry Goldwater wholeheartedly. Is that likely?
Well, it depends on a great many things. I think it depends on how the campaign shapes up. It depends on how Senator Goldwater, if he gets the nomination today, how he conducts himself. His approach to some of these very serious matters that were being debated on the floor of the convention last night. You've got some very basic principles at issues here. And I would think that all Republicans are going to have to search their consciences very deeply on these questions. That is to say, all Republicans who have been strongly in the camp of Governor Scranton of Pennsylvania. Now, you were on the floor last night, and you heard the debate on nuclear weapons and their control by the civilian chiefs, the heads of state, political control. And you heard the debate on civil rights. The Scranton forces were, the moderate forces, if you will, were defeated on all of those. There are very basic principles involved on each of these subjects. And I would think that it's going to require each Republican who have stood on those principles to examine the conduct of the Republican campaign and to examine his own conscience as to how he's going to conduct himself.
Congressman Lindsay, you made an impassioned appeal for the Civil Rights Amendment last night. And yet in the New York delegation, and that includes alternates as well, there are only 3 Negroes out of 184 delegates and alternates from the state of New York. How does it work out that way?
Well, you'll have to talk to the organization about that. As you know, the delegate selection is made by the county chairman in the various counties and by the state chairman and the regular party organization echelon. I'm not consulted on that. my advice is not sought on it. And I don't know how the selections are made. I assume it's done by the county chairman themselves.
Barry Goldwater this morning called Lyndon Johnson the biggest faker in the United States today, and he dared him to make an issue of civil rights. He's the phoniest individual who ever came along. He opposed civil rights until this year. Whose stand on civil rights do you prefer, Barry Goldwater or Lyndon Johnson?
I'll have to examine the record of President Johnson when he was in the Senate on the subject. His early career was spent usually in shooting down most of the strong proposals that came over to the Senate from the House of Representatives. That was true also while he was the majority leader of the Senate. I can recall when I was in the Department of Justice in the Eisenhower administration, our frustrations when the Senate, under the leadership of then Majority Leader Lyndon Johnson, knocked us down on some of the proposals that we'd gotten through the House.
Thank you very much, Congressman Lindsay. Now back to you, Walter.
Mike Wallace, still there?
Yes, Walter.
Mike, I know that with John Lindsay's youth, he's not exactly a veteran convention goer. I'm just wondering how he feels the mood of these delegates, the attitude of these delegates. So many of them are non-professionals coming to their first convention. Is their conduct, is it any different than past conventions that he's been to?
I'm not sure that I read the whole thing that you just said to me, Walter, and I hate to ask you to go all through it again. It was something about the conduct of the delegates in this and previous conventions.
Yeah.
Congressman, the conduct of the delegates at this convention as compared to previous conventions, Walter Trump, I'd ask if you see a considerable difference.
Yes, I do. My first convention was in 1940 when I was a page boy for Wilkie. And I've been to 3 of them since. This is I guess, the second time I've come as a delegate. And I think the conduct of the galleries, which is packed by the Goldwater forces, and by a substantial number of the delegates, too, which are overwhelmingly Goldwater, it appears, have been discourteous at certain moments. I think the treatment that they accorded Governor Rockefeller when he spoke last night was undignified, was rude, and unnecessary, and I objected to it very strenuously.
Mike, they're getting a little of that right now. Theodore McKeldin up there on the platform is lashing out at Birchites and extremism, and maybe we can listen to a little of it.
Leadership that forthrightly and without fear or consequences rejects extremism and rejects the support of all extremist groups. It must have leadership of the type implored. It must have leadership of the type implored from heaven by the young king of long ago who prayed, I am but a little child. I know not how to go out or come in. And thy servant is in the midst of thy people, which thou hast chosen, a great people that cannot be numbered nor counted for multitude. Give therefore to thy servant an understanding heart to judge thy people, that I may discern between good and bad. For who is able to judge this thy so great a people? If we are truly to represent all the Republicans in whose name we are gathered here, if we are to command the support of the majority of the American people in November, the Republican Party must have leadership. There is such leadership in the Republican Party today. It has been demonstrated in a lifetime of public service at all levels of government. The man of whom I speak has carried the fight for responsible republicanism from one end of this country to the other. He has fearlessly and tirelessly spoken out against extremism and fought radicalism of the left and radicalism of the right in the world, in this nation, and in the Republican Party. He has demonstrated his wisdom in the successful administration of the affairs of a great state. He has demonstrated his energy by a record of accomplishments that would grace a dozen lives. And his great bounty is attested by the needy and the poor of every clime and of every tongue. When he stood here last night, where I now stand, and was not permitted by you to speak. His response to that treatment, in my opinion, was his finest hour. And so, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me, a former governor of the state of Maryland, a great state twice, the state that brought religious freedom to this country, the only state founded by the Catholics who brought the religious freedom. It gives me great pleasure, as the mayor of the great city of Baltimore, a son of a poor policeman, to place in nomination a man of great wealth, of great culture, and who has used that great wealth and great culture and great knowledge to bless all mankind. Ladies and gentlemen of the convention, it is with pride that I second the nomination of Nelson Audrey Rockefeller.
Mayor Theodore McGeldon of Baltimore, former governor of Maryland, man who placed President Eisenhower's name in nomination in 1952, making a rousing speech against extremism and the Birchites. Those are the Scranton, that's the Scranton family that had just arrived here at the hall a moment ago, Mrs. Scranton and two of the Scranton children.
The state senator from Hawaii, the Honorable Toshio Anzia.
This will be a nominating speech for Senator Hiram Fong of Hawaii. Toshio Anzia
Mr. Chairman,
of Hawaii.
delegates and alternates, fellow Americans. 5 years ago, when Hawaii became a state, the eyes of America and the world turned toward this magnificent showcase of the American way of life. From the first moment, the people of Hawaii lived up to America's creed of equal opportunity for all. We offered the world tangible living proof that Americans believe all men are created equal by electing to the highest state and national offices persons of widely different racial extractions. The impact was stunning. Nowhere more so than in Asia and the Far East, wherein reside more than 1/2 of the world's population. Americans in our sister states became newly aware that Hawaii is the strategic link between the people of America and the people of Asia and the Pacific. That vast area, now the throbbing core of our continuing global struggle for peace. In this crucial region, where our nation is deeply committed to advancing peace and self-determination, the destiny of America is being shaped for generations to come. The times demand a leader who knows thoroughly the Pacific and the Far East, its people, its problems, and who knows how to build bridges of understanding and how to win friends for America there. It is, therefore, my great honor and happy privilege today to nominate an outstanding man of the Pacific for President of the United States, a shining symbol of the American success story, born of poor immigrant parents, a young go-getter who worked his way through the University of Hawaii and Harvard Law School, a successful attorney, an enterprising businessman, a farmer, a dedicated father and a devoted husband, and an outstanding civic leader. The first person of Asian ancestry to be elected to the United States Senate. A man who is serving with great distinction as senior senator in Congress from the state of Hawaii. A man who is a dedicated, lifelong Republican, who has demonstrated allegiance to our party by his loyalty to Republican principles and by his effective work for our party in local, state, and national affairs. He is here with us now as chairman of the Hawaii delegation to this convention. A public servant of long experience and a winner of elective office time and time again, a veteran legislator who believes in the worth and dignity of every individual, who has worked tirelessly so that people may attain their human needs for food, for homes, education, jobs, medical care, opportunity for youth, economic security for the elderly, and hope for advancement for all. A man whose compassionate concern for his fellow men has made him a champion of human rights and civil liberties for all, regardless of race, color, or national origin. A man who seeks to solve the problems facing our great nation in a manner completely consistent with our Constitution and completely consistent with our traditional humanitarianism. A citizen who has firm and unshakable faith that our nation will continue to bring a better life for our people with liberty and justice for all. A man who is confident that liberty and justice will in time triumph everywhere. A public official who believes peace will one day reign on earth for all mankind. A conviction that has guided him in the past and will govern him in the years ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, I now place for nomination for President of the United States this man of the Pacific, this eminent American statesman, as Hawaii's favorite son candidate, Paramal Fong, United States Senator from the Aloha State of Hawaii.
Mr. Angia is a Hawaiian state senator from the island of Maui in the Hawaiian Islands. This is his first convention. He's of Japanese ancestry. Senator Fong is of Chinese ancestry. CBS News coverage of the 1964 Republican Presidential Convention will continue in a moment. There's been a lot of talk here at this Republican convention in the San Francisco Cow Palace of forged tickets today on this big day of the convention, the day that the presidential nominee is selected. And among those who have gotten into the hall, there are a lot who have found seats already occupied, either by the legitimate occupants of the seats or by somebody who came in on forged tickets. At any rate, there are a lot of people wandering the halls here who haven't found a place to sit. And a great number of them have been passing by our CBS News area on the ground floor. Harry Reasoner's down there in that area. Harry, tell us about it.
Walter, I think there are a number of reasons why our room's so crowded right now. There are more people in it than there have been at any time since the convention started. In a way, you know, a convention is like a trade fair. There's soft drink companies here giving away their wares. We're giving away television. We got a set in the center of the room with 4 monitors where people can watch. One reason they come down here, as you said, is probably because they found somebody sitting where they're supposed to because of a forged ticket. But another reason is because of our delegate board. They're here keeping track. As during the day the counts change on our first ballot forecast just a moment ago, an assistant came in and gave Goldwater another vote. He's now figuring 863 first ballot votes, more than 200 more than he needs to win the nomination. One of these forged tickets was down here. I took a look at it. They're checking them because the ink smears on a forged ticket. I don't suppose you can see that it smears, but it does. But actually, we made a survey of the people in this room, and I'd hate to think that anyone with a forged ticket would then go to a CBS reception room. I think they're over in some other network. Most of these people are legitimate delegates, or for one reason or another could get on the floor if they wanted to. They give me a variety of reasons why they're in here. One gentleman said that our rug was considerably softer than NBC's, and he didn't think we'd pull it out from under him. But most of them say it's because they get a better idea of the coverage here watching television. It's like the people in Grand Central watching the astronauts when you were doing those broadcasts, except that here that the event that they're watching is just about 100 feet away across the hall, and they can still see it better in here. It's natural enough with all our cameras, but in a way, Walter, I think it's kind of sad. I haven't had exactly the same feeling since I once found myself in Singapore during the Malayan War, sitting in a movie theater, watching Claudette Colbert in a movie called Outpost in Malaya. Now, from this outpost at the Cow Palace, we'll go back to you.
All right, Harry. Miss Emma Smith, an American of Hawaiian ancestry, comes from Kikau on the island of Kauai, where she works for a sugar company and heads her island's Republican Women's Organization. She's at her first convention, and lo and behold, she finds herself at the speaker's stand, seconding the nomination of a fellow Hawaiian, Senator Hiram Fong, who only yesterday decided that his name could be placed in nomination here as an example of the opportunities for those of Asian extraction in these United States. Let's listen for a moment.
Distinction in the United States Senate. The first American of Asian ancestry to be elected to our Senate. His name and fame as a symbol of American fair play in the land of opportunity have spread far and wide throughout the Pacific region and the Asian continent. A vast part of the world where our nation has much at stake in the cause of freedom for all men. My friends, in paying tribute to Senator Fong today, we honor a man with an impressive record of contributions to his state and country. One with a lifelong devotion to republicanism and a notable success in government, business, and civic affairs. So, with great happiness and pride, I second the nomination of Hawaii's favorite son candidate for president, Senator Hiram L. Fong.
That's Senator Fong at his Hawaiian delegation.
And he is the Honorable John E. Longworth, a delegate from Alaska, a member of the House of Representatives of the state of Alaska. Representative Longworth.
Just heard Chairman Morton call on John E. Longworth, representative from Alaska, who is also going to second Fong's nomination. We just had a word from CBS News correspondent Hughes Rudd, who talked with Winthrop Rockefeller, brother of Nelson Rockefeller and candidate for the governorship in Arkansas, who Rudd quotes Winthrop Rockefeller as saying that he had his name withdrawn as a possible candidate to be brought before this convention because he doesn't think he ought to get his name confused in the minds of Arkansans with his brother Nelson Rockefeller, since the Arkansas delegation is solidly for Senator Goldwater. He doesn't want that confusion in his own race as he tries to get to the governorship in Little Rock. CBS News coverage of the 1964 Republican Presidential Convention will continue in a moment. This is Walter Cronkite at the Cow Palace in San Francisco for our CBS News coverage of the Republican National Convention. Now in its third night, the big night, when this party names the man that will run against President Lyndon Johnson in November. That man will be Senator Barry Goldwater. All of the tabulations show that he will sweep to an easy first ballot victory here tonight. His name was placed in nomination first several hours ago. We have since had the name of Governor Nelson Rockefeller of New York and Senator Hiram Fong of Hawaii placed in nomination, and now Senator Aiken of Vermont, wearing a rose in his lapel, the trademark of his candidate, Senator Margaret Chase Smith of Maine. He's placing her name in nomination. Murray Frompson is down on the floor with Mrs. William Scranton. Murray?
Right, Walter. Mary Scranton arrived here in the box about 15 minutes ago, and she's here with her family, Susan Scranton, her daughter, and little Pete, 10-year-old, and Bill Jr., who's going on 18. Mrs. Scranton, Walter Cronkite would like to talk to you. Put these...
Yes, Walter.
Hello, Mrs. Scranton.
How are you?
Well, very well, thank you.
Good.
And
You've been tremendous.
You're looking well despite the terrible days that you've had here and
How do
getting
I
around
look
all
with this headset? I don't think these have been terrible days. We've had an outpouring from the people of America which would warm the hearts of anyone. And Walter, this is what I wanted to talk to you about. The fact is that we have been unable to get the delegates to look at the 500,000 letters which we have parked outside of this convention floor. I know you're terribly busy and there are a lot of important things going on, but I wondered if it would be possible, if the delegates will not look at the letters, whether the press would be willing to.
I'm sure that the press would be willing to look at those, Mrs. Scranton. I'm wondering, I heard you say earlier, I'm not sure we got all of your impromptu remarks to the newsmen as you left the hotel a little while ago, about 52,000 letters, I think it was.
35.
35,000 from Illinois.
Yes, sir.
Do you have any other cases where the chairman of state delegations refused to deliver the letters to their delegation?
In that case, it was not the chairman, and in the case of Mr. Percy, which I referred to before, it was just the promise he made to me when I said, well, that he thought the delegates could see them, and I said, well, now how will we ever get them in? You know they won't allow them in. He said, I think they should, and I will see to it. He was overruled by higher authority and did not put up a fight. Yes, we do have other instances of states who would not allow the letters to be seen by the delegates. And if I may just a moment refer to Mr. Sinsheimer, he can tell you which states, or at least one or two. He told me just a few minutes ago when I asked him that over half of the states would not allow the letters to be seen by the caucus. Warren, what's the...
Well, California was the biggest one. There were some 75 or 80,000 letters from California, which evidently just lay in the caucus room floor. And there were quite a few other states. I haven't got a list with me, but it was quite discouraging. We brought all the letters here. They're in a truck in the parking lot. Anybody wants to see them, they can see them.
And I might say that they shouldn't only look at them, because these are not letters from people. Walter, these are letters from hearts of people, and if you just read a few, you too would be as shaken as Chuck Percy was when he read them in our room.
What do you think is next, Mrs. Scranton, for, not for your husband? We can assume he goes back to Harrisburg and does the job he's been doing for the state of Pennsylvania.
Walter, I don't assume that at all. I expect to see him in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue come next January.
Well, there's nothing like faith, and it shows in your face, Mrs. Scranton.
Sir, faith has moved mountains, and I am a woman of faith.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Scranton. Look forward to seeing you personally soon.
Thank you, Walter.
Right. Senator Aiken is making the nominating speech for Margaret Chase Smith. Now, let's listen.
I intend to support the nominee of this convention next November. Now, what do we have a president for? Certainly not to do just those things which you and I as individuals would like to have done. Certainly not to run this country exactly as he or she would like to run it. If that is the way we feel, we should promptly scrap our Constitution and become a monarchy. But until we reach that state of political depravity, the President of the United States will be required to perform the duties of the office as set forth by our Constitution and to administer laws and carry out programs as laid down by the Congress. In carrying out programs and administering laws as determined by the Congress, the President will necessarily use the great powers which originally were vested in the Congress, but which have long since been delegated to the executive branch. There are some Republicans who still insist that Congress rescind these delegations of authority. Let's not kid ourselves, however. The next president, whether Republican or Democrat, and regardless of race, creed, color, or sex, is not going to recommend that Congress rescind the powers that have been delegated to the White House over the past century. In view of this situation, it is far more important to elect a person of integrity and ability to the presidency, one who owes allegiance to no special interests, either domestic or foreign.
Now we go outside the Cow Palace to Hughes Rudd, outside the Cow Palace.
Walter, I'm standing actually just inside the main entrance to the Cow Palace where the Scranton demonstration is forming up, waiting to go out onto the floor. I heard you talking with Mrs. Scranton. She mentioned those letters, that she said she wished the delegates would come outside and look at them. Well, I was speaking with a young Scranton worker about an hour ago, and he was complaining to me that he kept sending word into the floor to the various Scranton leaders out there that the letters were here to be distributed on the floor. That apparently was the original program, but he said he couldn't get anybody to do anything about it. Incidentally, a lot of these Scranton supporters, most of them too young to vote, but they can still wave banners, were in the hall earlier. But what happened? They wouldn't let you stay in there?
Yeah, they took our tickets away. Two people wearing Goldwater buttons took our tickets away and then gave us to an usher and said our tickets were phony, and the usher kicked us out.
What happened to you in there?
I've got legitimate tickets, and I'm glad these people are for Scranton.
You got no problem. Who else was in there and was thrown out? Were you?
I was with him, and the Goldwater people kept the tickets.
They took your...
They took the guy with the Goldwater badge took our tickets, and he kept them, and he told the usher that we had fraudulent tickets, and the usher threw us out, but the Goldwater guy kept the tickets.
I heard that some people without tickets got in just by carrying Goldwater signs. Is that true, do you think?
I don't know.
That right there seems just like it. We were up in the top galleries, and it seemed that if we didn't have a Goldwater sign, we'd almost be forced out, actually. I mean, that's the way we seemed safe if we carried a Goldwater sign.
Well, who was doing the forcing out?
Well, it was those with Goldwater buttons, actually. Maybe the ushers, what seemed like helpers there. They'd say, well, may I see your ticket, please? You'd show them the ticket. Well, this is a phony ticket, so they tell the usher, and out you go.
All right, thank you. Well, Walter, within a few minutes, or possibly 20 minutes, this crowd will be ready to move out onto the floor. That's it from down here. Now back to you.
Thank you, Hughes. On the floor, we are hearing from Senator Aiken of Vermont, who is placing in nomination the name of Margaret Chase Smith.
A president should have courage. Courage to stand for the right when it may not be popular to do so. Courage to stand for decency in the conduct of public affairs. Courage to stand alone if necessary against formidable odds. Does my candidate have that kind of courage? I can refer you to several high-ranking officers and officials of the United States Armed Forces who have learned from experience that she is ably qualified in this respect. As a sincere testimonial to her courage, the Reserve Officers Association has recently designated her as Minuteman of the Year, the first time that this great honor has ever been conferred upon a person of her sex. Fifth, a president should have common sense. My candidate stands par excellence in this respect. Time and again, I have seen her keep her head when all about her were losing theirs and blaming it on everyone but themselves. She wants to get things done that ought to be done, and she wants them done right. She does not panic.
That is Senator Smith on the left there.
Let us have order in the chamber. Senator from Vermont.
The candidate I shall propose does not panic when things don't go to suit her. She just keeps on headed for her goal, which at this moment is the Republican nomination for the presidency. We need a candidate who does not panic in a crisis, not even a campaign crisis. Nor should we support a candidate just because we are partial to any particular industry, either at home or abroad. We don't want an industry in the White House. We want a living, capable, conscientious human being. We want to nominate and elect a president who will promote the interests of our nation, both at home and abroad, with impartial consideration for all. We want a candidate who enjoys the confidence of people in all walks of life. The one I shall nominate has demonstrated time and again that she can walk with kings nor lose the common touch. She never forgets her own people, and the glare of glory has never turned her head. The record majorities which the people of her home state have given her with each passing election are eloquent testimony to this trait of her character. Her conduct during this campaign has been rather unusual. She has not neglected her work in the Senate to chase down delegates to this convention. The job she was elected to do has come first. Running solely on her record and her qualifications for the office, she has spent no money for advertising, has hired no paid workers, has made no promises, and will have nothing to do with the wheeling and dealing, the trading and raiding practices, which I understand have sometimes been used in political campaigns. I now ask you two questions. Do you want the United States to have good government? If you do, then vote for the candidate best qualified to give good government. Do you want to win the November election? If you do, apparently we have another demonstration being organized in the back. I've been interested in watching them through the progress of the day, and I've come to the conclusion through, and I make the prediction that tomorrow morning, the man in the White House will announce another upsurge in the American economy and probably try to take credit for it. But getting back, late actually. All right, Bill. I ask the last question again. Do you want to win the November elections? If you do, then vote for the candidate who enjoys the confidence and respect of all people and who can get the votes necessary to win. I am now proud and honored to nominate that candidate, the senior senator from the great Republican state of Maine, Senator Margaret Chase Smith.
This is unusual for an announced candidate for the presidential nomination to be in the hall when the demonstration takes place, the nomination is made, as it is to have a woman placed in nomination and for the top spot by a major party. This has not. Roger Mudd is there with Margaret Chase Smith now.
Miss Smith, are you going to withdraw your name?
Indeed, I have. I've had a hard time to convince some of these people. My candidacy for presidency has been very serious. I'm very happy with that nomination.
Senator, what have you accomplished by this campaign?
Oh, I think I will have accomplished a great deal. I think I will have made quite a great contribution.
Mrs. Smith, are you going to have your name withdrawn? Will you go before the convention? All in red instead of customary just red rose.
That's right. I thought to cheer things up a little bit if they would move it.
Thank you very much, Senator. Miss Smith, will you have your name withdrawn, a formal withdrawal, or just what will you do after?
I have no plans to.
You're going to stick it out through the...
Senator,
will you support the nominee if you're not nominated?
Margaret?
Miss Smith?
Margaret, again, please.
Senator Smith.
One more time.
Senator?
How do you like that demonstration? Well, I'm trying to see it. I don't get it. Well, I have to campaign my own state first because I had 8 weeks to put in up there, and it depends on when the session. I would expect to be out on it.
Mrs. Smith, what kind of a campaign do you expect to make?
In Maine,
Yeah.
we have a campaign between the congressman and the senator for the Senate seat. Not I. I'm in the 1966.
Miss...
You expect the Senate to vote for it?
Maine's quite a Republican state.
You have no doubt about it.
No, I never count on anything till I count the votes. Till I get the votes counted.
Senator, it's a moment of history. The first woman placed seriously by a major party in nomination. Are you very moved by this moment?
I'm tremendously moved by that nominating state. That's one of the greatest tributes that's ever come to me.
If you are not nominated, will you support the nominee of the party?
I shall support the nominee that comes out of the convention.
What about the vice presidency, Miss Smith? Mrs. Smith, about the vice presidency. Do you have some personal choice in that? Who would you like to see as a nominee?
I haven't thought about it.
Mrs. Smith, you realize that you're bringing
Margaret Chase Smith standing in her box overlooking the convention floor wearing the traditional rose in her lapel that she wears every day to the floor of the Senate. All right, Walter.
Mrs. Smith, who has said all along that she is a serious candidate for the presidency of the United States, although she spent only some $335, I believe she said, on her campaign and made virtually no campaign trips, not even in the sister state of New Hampshire, now has been placed in nomination here. If she is the first person of her sex to ever be mentioned as a presidential candidate from the rostrum and to find this sort of a demonstration going for in a political convention. Only 2 women in our history have ever run for the presidency, and they were both on small minor party tickets way back in the late 19th century in 1872 and 1884. Red-haired Mrs. Woodhull, a self-styled free lover, and ran on a free lover ticket, and whatever that is, and Belva Anna Lockwood, a distinguished Washington attorney, ran. These were in the days when women were still trying to get the vote, and that was the main purpose of both of their campaigns. Mrs. Smith, it is thought, has been campaigning primarily to inject women into consideration for top spots on the ticket. In the back of the Cow Palace here, Bill Stout is with General Edwin Walker. Bill?
Yes, Walter. One of the most familiar figures in American politics, a military hero who turned to politics after retiring, General Edwin Walker. What do you think of the flavor of the convention, sir?
I think the flavor of the convention is very, very excellent. It's wonderful to see so many people that are demanding to be heard, and this convention is built on grassroots development and the enthusiasm from the grassroots. It's wonderful to see what's going on here at the convention in San Francisco.
Senator Goldwater, your candidate?
I am supporting a platform anywhere I find a platform that I think fits America and our country and our people.
What did you think of the attempt to write in a strong denunciation of conservative groups, including the John Birch Society, extremist groups in general, and that one in particular?
Well, I think this is a last gasp effort, and has no point at all. It shows that they're hurting, and we're going to every extreme to find something to write in the platform. It's a very wonderful platform.
You like it the way it is?
I like it the way it is without the changes, and I'm glad they were all voted down, and particularly the one with respect to nuclear weapons, as well as the civil rights.
Do you feel, as a good many people seem to, that this convention represents a turning point for the Republican Party, a shift back to conservatism?
It's certainly a turning point in the Conservative Party, and I think it's bigger than that. I believe it's a turning point in the nation. There's a great conservative force in the Democratic Party, particularly across the South, and certainly further up north, as well as indicated as on his campaign in that area. So there's a great shift throughout the nation with respect to conservatism.
General Walker. Thank you very much, General. Walter, back to you.
Mr. Goldwater. Here the demonstration goes on. Bill?
Yes.
Bill, if the general's still there, would you ask him what party plans to take in the Democratic convention? After all, he ran for governor of Texas on a Democratic ticket. Is he going to Atlantic City?
They want to be secure and nationally secured, and I am convinced that 90% of them at least want the military arm of their country to stand between them and all enemies, whoever those enemies happen to be.
General, you ran for governor of Texas on the Democratic ticket. What part do you intend to play in the Democratic convention? Will you be at Atlantic City?
I am not committed to the Democratic Party in any way. I'm no more committed to one party than I am to another. I'm perfectly free to support to what I see that is good in a cause and a purpose for this country anywhere I go, and I thank you very much.
What do you think of the chances
Walter?
Well, I suppose that's the answer. I don't know whether he's going to Atlantic City or not, but I had heard earlier that he did intend to. He told some people around the Jack Tar Hotel, which is the headquarters of the Southern delegations here, that he would be. Campaign 64, CBS News coverage of the 1964 Republican Convention will continue in a moment. At the Cal Palace in San Francisco, the Republican National Convention, which tonight will name its candidate to run in the presidential election of 1964. Right now, down on the floor, they are demonstrating for Senator Margaret Chase Smith of Maine, whose name was placed before the convention by Senator Aiken of Vermont. There's been a great deal of discussion around the halls of this Cal Palace today and in the hotel rooms downstairs as to who Senator Barry Goldwater, once his nomination has been made official here tonight, will select as his vice presidential candidate. I've just been handed a note from our special reporter, Dick Harwood, who says that the Kentucky delegation is trying to work up a demonstration tomorrow to boost the candidacy of Thruston Morton, their senator from Kentucky, who is the chairman, permanent chairman of this convention, and has been one of those mentioned. Also mentioned, of course, is William P. Miller, the congressman from New York, who is the national chairman of the Republican Party, and Walter Judd, the former congressman from Minnesota, as well as other names tossed into a hat. There's been some talk today that they would attempt to unify this party with an offer to William Scranton to run for the vice presidency, but Mrs. Scranton, you heard on our air just a short while ago, said he flatly would not do that. Eric, what do you think the major consideration is going to be? Do you have any idea of how the Goldwater people are going to feel about this vice presidential?
No, I don't really know. I don't. It's probably going to be somebody not too well known, and Mr. Miller is not very well known, even in New York State, though he's been chairman of the National Committee for some time. I was just thinking, Walter, a moment ago about part that women are playing in this convention. I don't recall one in which they've played such a forceful part. Here is Senator Smith actually in nomination with a considerable demonstration going for her. And Mrs. Scranton, who is fighting this cause of her husband's right down to the line, not giving up even now, with her teeth in this thing. She's not letting go. Can you recall anything quite like that, where a wife of a candidate has fought the thing so hard and so outspokenly?
Almost the exact opposite. We've seen the retiring wives of the candidates in recent years. Mrs. Eisenhower took absolutely no part. Les Truman took absolutely
Mrs.
no
Dewey
part.
took very little part, just went along.
Pat Nixon, I suppose, has been the most active wife of a candidate in recent years, wouldn't you say?
Yes, but nothing quite like this. Mrs.
No.
Scranton down here carrying on the campaign, using every device, getting to you, getting the television audience, talking about those letters, going right on to the very last barrier here. This is rather remarkable. It's a remarkable woman, it seems to me.
Incidentally, we're working on trying to get a picture of that truckload of letters that Mrs. Scranton suggests we might like to take a look at, and we would. They say they're somewhere around this hall. We're going to try to get a look at them a little bit later on. You know, the number of women here, I had the figure here for 2 days, and now that you bring it up right at this critical moment, I don't have it in front of me, but the number of women at this convention as delegates and alternates, I believe, is actually less than it has been in the last 2 Republican conventions. Not by far. It's been about the same number, roughly 600 or 700 among the 2,600 this year.
Well, of course, the important change here is not only the viewpoint of these delegates, the very conservative nature of them, but also it seems this party is narrowing its base in racial and religious terms. You've had the gentleman from Hawaii, and he talked about the racial mixture of this country, but actually there's less and less of that. No Negroes from the South, for example, for the first time in many, many years. And not very many of other ethnic groups either.
Eric, you know, this is going to be a very, very long night, I'm afraid, at the Cow Palace. Last night we ran for 9 hours. I think that session, or at least we were on the air a total of 9 hours. It's now, that crazy clock that shows the time all around the world. I'm never sure which it is. It's a couple of minutes of 7 Pacific Daylight Time. And that means this session has been underway now for 4.5 hours. We're advised from the platform by Bill Small down there that it looks like it'll be sometime after 9 o'clock Pacific time before we get to a roll call vote. That's better than 2 hours away from now, and I think that sounds a little bit optimistic. We've just nominated half, or placed in nomination half of those who are going to be brought before the convention tonight. The next one to be nominated will be Governor Scranton. Whether they're the seconding nominations for Senator Smith, we haven't heard yet. Waiting to hear.
Demonstrations outside are going on. I'm bemused by the thought of the Negro demonstrators demanding freedom. We can understand what they're talking about, but what are the young Americans for freedom? What kind of freedom are they denied? Do they tell you?
No, we might ask Bill Stout if he's gotten any word from them as to exactly what their demands are, what kind of freedom they're after, and what they feel they haven't gotten. Bill, are you out there?
Okay, fine. We've got Mike Embry back.
Well, apparently Bill isn't tuned into our channel right at the moment. We'll get back to him very shortly. I just had word from Bill Small that the latest estimate now is not 9 o'clock Pacific Daylight Time for that roll call, but 11 o'clock Pacific Daylight Time, 4 hours from now. That sounds like a long time away. I don't know why it would take that long, but that's an estimate. We're going to pause right now, Eric, for station identification.
This is the CBS Television Network.
Back at the Cow Palace in San Francisco, and at the podium right now is Governor Reed of Maine, Senator Margaret Chase Smith's home state, who is making one of the seconding speeches for her. Let's recount what we were saying just before that station break about how this timetable is working out in San Francisco, and recount a little bit of what has happened here today. This convention began 4.5 hours ago, and 4 hours ago it got down to the business of hearing names for the nomination for the presidency. The first one out of the box was that of Senator Barry Goldwater. We had a half-hour demonstration, a boisterous one for Senator Goldwater, and then moved on to the other nominations of some of the other people being placed before the convention. Senator Fong of Hawaii was the last one, and before that, Governor Nelson Rockefeller of the state of New York. And just now, Senator Margaret Chase Smith of Maine. That gets us halfway through the list to be placed before the convention, and it's taken 4 hours to do that job. So there's an estimate from the podium based on some rather simple arithmetic that it's going to take 4 hours to get through the remaining 4. Our estimate is it won't take quite that long, but almost. The next name to come up after this, the seconding speeches for Senator Smith, will be that of the only other serious contender for the presidency, Governor William Scranton of Pennsylvania. After that, the name of Governor Romney of Michigan and of Walter Judd of Minnesota and Ambassador Lodge will be placed before the convention. All of those will require seconding speeches and demonstrations, except perhaps that of Lodge. He has said that he wants his name withdrawn. He'll let it be placed and cannot prevent it from being placed before the convention, but immediately thereafter, a message from Ambassador Lodge will be read to the convention by Chairman Morton, and that will cut off seconding speeches, and they'll move on to the balloting for the presidential nomination. Balloting, which is considered 100% certain to go for Senator Barry Goldwater. Although, as you heard Mrs. Mary Scranton tell us from her box here at the convention just a short while ago, she still has faith that moves mountains, and she hopes, she said, that it's going to move this convention. The time is running out. Another 3 or 4 hours, fate will have been cast here, and the name of the nominee will be known.
Margaret Smith.
With the presidential nomination apparently locked up, the one big question remaining is the name of the vice presidential candidate. A man rather close to the mainstream here is former Vice President Richard Nixon, and today he denied one rumor but passed along a few others. Here's CBS News correspondent Paul Niven.
Called another correspondent and myself into his suite to deny categorically and emphatically a report which had been broadcast a few minutes earlier, incidentally not broadcast by CBS News, about an alleged secret meeting between himself and Senator Goldwater sometime yesterday or last night. Nixon said that he had talked, as we all knew, with Senator Goldwater at a lunch at the Mark Hopkins Hotel yesterday noon, and that Goldwater had expressed an interest in a further private meeting with him. However, the former vice president said that since that meeting yesterday noon, he had had no communication of any kind with Goldwater or any of his people. The broadcast report had gone on to speculate about Mr. Nixon as the possible vice presidential nominee. Nixon told us frankly that he had heard up till yesterday that party chairman William Miller had the vice presidential nomination locked up. Nixon said that as far as he knew, Miller was still the front runner. However, in conversations with delegates who had come to see him today, Nixon had also heard mention of the names of Congressman Gerald Ford of Michigan, former Congressman Walter Judd of Minnesota, and himself, Nixon. But on the subject of himself as a vice presidential nominee, Nixon told us categorically that he would not accept the vice presidential nomination in any circumstances. This is Paul Niven at the St. Francis Hotel.
Stan Levy is with Len Hall at the St. Francis Hotel now, outside of Vice President Nixon's room. Stan?
Mr. Hall, do you have any reading on the vice presidential situation?
Well, I would make a guess that it's going to be Representative Miller of New York.
Mr. Hall, you've been up here in Mr. Nixon's suite. Have you been talking about the vice presidential situation, sir?
No, not at all. We've just been talking general politics and the Republican Party.
Have you heard anything about a meeting between Mr. Nixon and Mr. Goldwater to talk this situation over at all, sir?
If there is such a meeting, I know nothing about it. And in fact, nothing like that came up while we were in there.
What's your feeling about the Republican Party this fall, Mr. Hall? You're an old pro in this business. How do you analyze it at this point?
Well, I think the power, the center of gravity of the Republican Party more or less has shifted a little bit west this time. The Republican Party in the East has dominated many conventions, and always those in the West and Midwest and South have come along in good spirit and supported the candidate. I'm certain the same thing's going to happen this time, and we're going to have a united Republican Party behind Barry Goldwater.
Is this a good thing for the party, Mr. Hall?
I think the party is going to be strong the moment we leave this convention.
Thank you very much, Leonard Hall.
Leonard Hall is one of the powers of the Republican Party, a former chairman of the party, and a consultant among all of the kingmakers of the party whenever he has been. On the floor of the convention, Congresswoman Frances Bolton of Ohio is seconding Senator Margaret Chase Smith now.
That I stand here, one of those to second the nomination of Margaret Chase Smith of Maine for the presidency of the United States. A woman of rich experience in all that is best in American living. She is an example of what this country stands for. Her life has not been one of ease. Rather, has it been filled with responsibility, heavy family burdens, financial problems. These she has carried with a smiling courage that has won her the admiration of all who know her. One of her strong characteristics has been her pride, not for herself, but for and in women as a whole. To do things on her own, to prove as she has done in each election that Americans, the American people, can judge intrinsic values unadulterated by money. Everywhere she went, and she covered the state well, volunteers sprang up like mushrooms to drive her, to gather people together to meet her, to hear the simple words that came from her heart and went straight into their hearts. She has won every election, has made a reputation for the state of Maine that few, if any, states can ever aspire to. The Republican Party does well to bring to this convention this candidate for the presidency. As a party, we must continue to seek women for high posts. President Eisenhower gave to Ovida Kulpavi the responsibility of the new Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. And she followed this with many other evidences of the Republican appreciation, newly come by, of competent and experienced women. Now the moment is here when a woman of very high order is presenting herself for the most important office in the land. It is a glowing milestone on the road women have built for themselves and for national recognition. Only the candidacy for the presidency, the top position in the hands of the people, could demonstrate to the world the tremendous contribution this exquisitely feminine, politically experienced woman from Maine is making towards the day when men and women everywhere will have learned that not until women carry their share of the responsibility will there be peace and goodwill on the earth. Margaret and I took our husbands' places in the House of Representatives in 1940. For 9 years, we worked closely together, learning to respect each other deep down in the inner reaches of friendship. Then she became Senator Smith, and now is in her third term, the only woman to have served in both houses of Congress. On the House Committee on Naval Affairs and on the House Armed Services Committee, she drew presidential commendation. In the Senate, she has served with exceptional capacity on the committees on appropriation, armed services, space, government operations, rules, District of Columbia and the Republican Policy Committee. A lieutenant colonel in the Air Force Reserve, she is acknowledged a champion of reserve legislation in the Congress. Before her marriage, she was a teacher, a telephone operator, newspaper, and woolen company executive, and was a nationally syndicated columnist for more than 5 years. Just try that and see what that means by way of work. Let me tell you about her voting record. She holds the all-time roll call voting record in the entire history of the United States. 1,798 consecutive votes without a miss. In 1948, her election to the Senate was by the highest percentage of a majority and the greatest total vote majority in the history of Maine. In 54, when she was re-elected to a second full 6 terms in the Senate, she was the top vote getter of all the candidates for the office. In 1960, the election which she was re-elected to a 3rd term, and again she was the top vote getter. I have been asked, but what can a woman know about foreign affairs? How can she be qualified in foreign areas of a president's responsibility? 9 extensive trips throughout the world have given her first-hand knowledge not only of the problems of the many countries, but an understanding of the personalities with whom we must deal. Few politically trained people in history have conferred with so many leaders. Her calm objectivity with a charming smile makes her peculiarly fitted to deal with the great decisions that a president has to make. Fellow Republicans, in seconding the nomination of Senator Margaret Chase Smith for the presidency of these United States, I give you the first woman to be placed in nomination for president by a major political party. I sincerely hope that many of you will recognize her capacity and her consecration to the most far-reaching goals of the United States, and that you will give her your vote. She is indeed making history today. History for us women, and for the United States as accepting the unusual, for the Republicans to accept the unusual. We are making history also today, friends, and I am asking that the infinite be with us in this as in all our deliberations. Thank you.
That was Congresswoman Frances Bolden of Ohio, seconding Senator Margaret Chase Smith for the presidential nomination. Campaign 64, CBS News coverage of the 1964 Republican Convention will continue in a moment. Now let's go down to Mike Wallace with Chuck Percy, candidate for the governorship of Illinois, on the floor.
Walter, I'm sitting here with Charles Percy, and I heard you talking with Mrs. William Scranton a little while ago about those letters that she says that were sent over to the Illinois delegation but were never delivered to the delegation. Chuck Percy has been talking with his wife, who is someplace here in the hall, and I believe that she's about to give him the same information.
Lorraine, I wonder if you could tell me what the message was that Mary Scranton had on network television.
What do you want?
I'd like the message that they say you have now from Mary Scranton. What was it she said?
One of our delegates in the delegate lounge said that he had heard in an interview that Mary Scranton had said that Chuck Percy had broken his promise to her in that there were 60,000 pro-Scranton letters that were to go to the delegation and had not been given. But I told him that I didn't know anything about those letters and that the letters were practically even, both for Scranton and Goldwater. In fact, a few more probably were sent from the Goldwater people.
Well, Lorraine, the story is this, and I think it would be well. It'll be hard for me to call Mary Scranton from the floor. Could you call her? And as you know, she's one of the most wonderful women I've had in politics. Several days ago, I went over to see her, as you know, and talked with her at her request. I was anxious to talk with her, particularly to explain to her the nature of the pledge that I had made 12 months ago, that I would vote with the majority of the delegation, and told her that I couldn't begin a political career on a broken pledge, so that I had to vote with the majority of the delegation because I had the unique job of uniting this party in Illinois after the convention is over. And I wanted her to understand this, and I knew that Governor Scranton understood it himself. She asked me about the 30,000 to 35,000 letters that had come to the Scranton headquarters from Illinois and asked what they should be done with them. And actually, she showed me those letters, and I read through some of them. When I saw them, I suggested that they be sent over to the Illinois delegation. The next morning, I met Larry Coughlin, the representative from Scranton headquarters, and the letters were taken right into the Illinois delegation room at the Fairmont Hotel. I told Senator Dirksen, our chairman, about them, and Senator Dirksen announced from the floor to the delegates that these 30 to 35,000 letters were available, that they could be inspected and read. And then he turned to the secretary, Ray Page of the delegation, Ray sitting right next to me here, Lorraine, and he said, I want it made a matter of record that this delegation has been told about these letters, and every delegate is eligible to read every one of these letters. Arthur Bidwell, sitting right next to me, the Senate Pro Tem. You were a delegate. You were told about those letters, were you?
It was a complete and accurate report, Governor, that you just given.
That isn't a criticism of what you just had to say.
Well, what we did then, actually after the Senator Dirksen had told him about it, in fact, Secretary Ray Page has his minute books here, and this is the telegram, actually, that was read to the delegates indicating that 35,000 letters were there, and it was signed Illinois Scranton for President Committee. Secondly, after the famous Scranton letter was released to us, and we had copies of it sent to Senator Goldwater, there was a great deal of concern in the delegation and a great deal of emotion about this. They wanted, as you remember, they wanted to pass a resolution of censure. I then rose and suggested that we wait 24 hours, let the dust settle, don't be emotional about this matter. This is the way a campaign gets, and told them again about the 35,000 letters that were there. Some of the delegates have seen and read those letters. Then the last thing we did was to consult with the Scranton headquarters about what disposition should be made of them. We made the offer to acknowledge every single one of them. The next morning I held a staff meeting with 16 people, and we've set the machinery up for acknowledging them.
Where are those letters now, Mr. President?
Those letters are now at the Percy for Governor headquarters, and a staff of 16 people. I know the look of concern my campaign manager, who's also an alternate delegate here, has on his face. This is quite a job, but we felt quite obligated, even though the letters are addressed to the headquarters and not to us, to acknowledge those letters.
That's the solution from Charles Percy, Walter, of the missing letters. Now back to you.
We just heard from Duke Kaminsky, one of the veteran reporters around the State House at Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and a special reporter for us here at the Cow Palace for the Republican Convention, that some of the better informed Pennsylvania delegates, as he puts it, have learned that William Scranton will appear here at the Cow Palace after he has been placed in nomination, and will appear on the floor to take himself out of the race. This is the report from our special reporter, Duke Kaminsky. That would come, if it does come to pass, in a very short time now. The last of the seconding speeches for Senator Margaret Chase Smith is being made just now, and the next order of business, as we have been led to believe from the platform, will be to hear Dr. Milton Eisenhower place before the convention the name of William Scranton. Martin Agronsky is down there on the floor with Senator John Tower of Texas. Martin?
Yes, Walter. We're having a terribly frustrating time down here. We keep running into people who know who the vice presidential candidate is almost certain to be, and we can never get him to tell us. Now, I'm here with Senator Tower, who I have every reason to believe does know, who's indicated that he does know, but has also indicated very clearly he's not going to tell me. Let's start anyway. Who is going to be Mr. Goldwater's running mate? Do you know, Senator Tower?
Well, actually, Martin, I really don't know, and I don't think it has been decided definitely yet.
Really not?
I don't think so.
Well, some of the people very close to Senator Goldwater have indicated the choice has been made. That's not so?
Well, I don't think it is. I think a number of names are under consideration, but I don't believe the final choice has been made.
Senator Tower, would you think that the candidate who is chosen will represent an effort on the part of Senator Goldwater to broaden the base of his appeal, or to choose, by that I mean a liberal, or to choose a conservative who is more in line with his thinking?
Well, I don't believe there really is such thing as a liberal Republican in the sense to say Hubert Humphrey is a liberal. I think that...
Well, how would you describe Senator Javits?
Well, I would describe Senator Javits as what we might call a moderate Republican or a middle-of-the-road Republican.
Or Senator Keating?
I would say the same for Senator Keating. I think that our nominee will come from a northeastern state, probably. I think he'll be chosen with an eye to getting a good campaigner. Not necessarily with an eye to carrying a particular state, but with an eye to getting a good campaigner who understands politics and who who has the physical stamina and the intellect to make a good campaign.
Sounds to me like you might be describing, when you limit to the Northeast, either Mr. Miller, Congressman Miller of New York, or Governor Scranton of Pennsylvania.
Martin,
yes?
I hate to interrupt this, but
it could be any
Martin
number
is just
of
about
people.
to introduce Dr. Milton Eisenhower, and I think we better get back to the podium.
One of our foremost institutions, an institution that's known for its leadership in the scientific and the cultural field throughout the world.
Incidentally, we just heard from Craig Truax, the state chairman from Pennsylvania, very close to Governor Scranton, that he says there is nothing to that story that Governor Scranton will come to Cow Palace to withdraw his name after the nomination. Here is Dr. Milton Eisenhower, the younger brother of former President Eisenhower. At 64, the president of Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore and the head of the Republican Critical Issues Council.
Mr. Chairman, fellow delegates, ladies and gentlemen, we delegates in this convention hall are here on behalf of millions of fellow Republicans to chart the future course of this great nation. These millions are watching us at this moment. We are here on behalf of all Americans who have faith that the two-party system will provide the highest caliber of leadership, and Americans everywhere are closely following these proceedings. And we are here on behalf of a watchful and deeply concerned free world which looks to the United States for wise leadership in the endless struggle for universal freedom. Every government in the world, friend and foe alike, is monitoring our actions with mixed feelings of apprehension and hope. If we now fail to nominate the right man, we fail not only our party, but our nation and all the free world. There are times in the life of every great nation that demand of its leaders unprecedented foresight, wisdom, and courage. This is such a time, and it must not find us wanting. On every farm and every hamlet and city, Americans are praying for a leader of steadfastness and strength to guide them through these perilous days. They are gravely concerned, and they have reason to be. The free world is in danger. The present administration has blunted the sword and shattered the shield of the Atlantic Alliance, which Republicans kept sound and secure through the dangerous 50s. This administration has imperiled the wall of freedom built by Republican leadership and has allowed a wall of shame to be built in Berlin. It looks upon Cuba, the cancer in our hemisphere, as a mere nuisance. And in Southeast Asia, it is engaged in a ceaseless struggle of no victory. Domestically, this administration is hypnotized by depression economics. The spending spree in Washington knows no restraint except in the use of electricity in the White House, where much more light is needed. The only great achievement of the past 4 years, passage of the Civil Rights Act, was accomplished with the inspired leadership